What we're going to look at next in next number of slides are such as what are the activities that involve in producing an information system. Basically, we call it system development activities or system development steps, so that upon completion of all these steps or stages in building the system, we should be able to produce a solution to an organizational problems, or might even come out with some recommendation, opportunity to overcome the problems with the current existing system or with the current business. So like what I said earlier, what we're going to see in the next couple of slides are quite technical, very much into IT related, compared to the last two sessions which were very much into business related. So please stop me or let me go further if you require any further clarification or explanation on any particular topic. So what are the stages or what are the steps involved in developing or in building the systems are such as we always start with system analysis as the very first stage, or as usual for any project there will be what we call investigation stage or data gathering stage as a very system development stage, where we have to identify the objective of the project, the goals that we want to go for, the aims of the project. We need to identify who are the people who will be involved with specific roles and with some generic role, which group will be affected, and the planning. The planning, remember, it includes the cost and the timeline with the deadline. So all that need to be prepared upfront before we go into the stage which is known as a system analysis, because system analysis is already where you start developing the system. But normally before even before we start developing the system, we need to make sure we have all this groundwork done. We have identified the people, who, when, cost, plannings and all that stuff done for that project. So with that, we will move on with system analysis. I will explain the details for each stage in the next coming couple of slides. Upon completion of system analysis, we will move on into what we call system design, which are same as system analysis, are very complicated tasks or lengthy activities or steps are involved in these two processes. Continue with programming. Normally system development involve huge group of people or programmers or developers in order to come out with the system with all the automated tasks or practices are being developed and need to be written or need to be developed using certain programming languages, as well as with a database, with the identified database. So the system will be connected to the database, will be linked so that all your data, information and knowledge will be in the database and will be using appropriate developed interface to communicate with the users. So once the programming tasks completed, which we will see into the detail later, testing need to be done. There are various level of testing that we will be talking shortly in order to complete the information system development tasks. And next will be the conversion. Conversion here meaning the implementation method. Either we're going to use, there are many methods available, pilot, conversion or implementation method, or we call it pilot stage or pilot run, or we're going to use parallel implementation, or we're going to use stage implementation, or we're going to use prototyping. It all depends on what was the decision made upfront before even we start planning or before even we start developing the systems. And moving on definitely will be production and maintenance of the build-up system. So the stages that we have just discussed are presented nicely in an infographic format, where it starts with system analysis, design, programming, testing, conversion, or implementation stage, follows with production and maintenance stage. And in high level system development, or in a sophisticated system development work, there will be options or mechanism where when you move from one stage to the other stage, we need to make sure the pre-stage or the prior stage is completed, so we don't miss any activities or steps that can create problems or issues or errors at the later stage. So there will be a balance checking activities, yeah, to make sure everything is in place before we move on to the next step, and that continues until we implement and having the system live. Okay, let me go into not too detailed but to certain extent explaining what are the activities or detailed steps in this particular stage, which is known as a system analysis, just for your information. So basically what we do, we analyze a problem and then we define the problem, or we call it problem statement, and also if possible, if it is known, we will try to identify all the causes to the problems, but definitely we will not have the solution. We might know what is the solution, but definitely the solutions are not in the format that we are looking for. So we can kind of forecast or look forward some proposal as a solution, what you want your new system to do, or to be used, to be implemented to overcome those problems. So what we do normally, we will write system proposal report, describe with details the CBA, what we call cost and benefit analysis, for each solution or recommendation, so that the team of people, the management plus the middle management and the line people, all can do brainstorming and review on all these methods before we move on with the decision making and implementation and so on. Also, at the same time, at this stage, the group of people who will be involved, mainly the system analysts with the representative from key areas or key development, need to identify all the required information, who needs what information, where, when and how. And also during this period of time, or even before we start with the systems analysis work, like I have just shared with all of you, feasibility study or investigation stage will be carried out in order to look at, or in order to review at every solution, whether it is a good investment, good to go, and so on. Yeah. Also, there will be a lot of questions and discussion, and decision need to be made, especially on technology, because there are many options are available, there are many players, there are many so-called alternative technologies are available. So that will be a real challenge for the management team and for the technical people to decide which technology to go for, which skills to acquire, which kind of training to send or to be trained, and so on. So there will be a lot of or long list of questions that we need to take a look, and we need to review as part of the project team members before we move on with systems analysis and the rest of the stages. Under the system design stage, uh, is more into describing the system specification that will deliver functions identified during the system analysis stage. So we are moving into the technical areas where once we have identified what are the function, features or capabilities of the new system, we will be start working on coming out with the system spec, requirement spec, and should address all managerial, organizational, and technological component uh, of system solution that we are recommending, or that we are going for. So system design, it involves a lot of IT technical activities, which I'm not going to share with you here, but there is a long list of technical diagrams such as uh, event-based diagram, context diagram, data flow diagram, which we might look into one or two later, but those are very technical, very IT related, which are not required to be discussed here, but I can just introduce to you. There is 8 to 9 different diagrams that we need to come out with for any system before we moving on into developing the system in terms of programming and testing. So it is a very technical job, requires a lot of IT related or engineering related team members in order to make sure the system design, programming and testing to be carried out according to the requirement. And what are the roles of the end users are to provide user related information which are required to develop the system. User must have sufficient control over design process to ensure that system reflect their business priorities and information needs. So user will play a very critical role. Users from all the departments, users who will be using the system in the future, to make sure the IT team and the vendors develop what the user needs, not what the IT team and the vendors are capable of, but what the users really expecting out of the system development work. Insufficient user involvement in design effort can cause a major system failure, and this happens in many cases that we can name a few, but we don't want to take that risk or that direction. So in order to avoid that, we make sure that there is a very strong involvement from the user, and users are responsible in providing required information, and also to make sure the IT team and the vendors are doing exactly what they are expecting for. So like what I mentioned earlier, the design stage is a very complicated, and a lot of roles and activities are actually for the IT team, such as they need to take a look at input, output, the interface, database design, processing requirement, what are the manual procedures and which can be automated, which cannot be automated, which can be semi-automated, what are the controls need to be put in place. Security control, it can be a huge topic, huge areas to look at. Documentation, all the documentation will be another huge task. Normally there will be a separate team who will be involved in the documentation. There will be number of technical writers who will be writing and creating all the documents onto online format. Conversion, when come to the implementation, as we will be talking about later, is another huge task where there will be a big number of IT members will be involved, because this is a very challenging job where the data need to be migrated from a manual data, from offline data, from external parties, from third parties, from our own current users, from all the departments, and the data can be in any forms. So there will be a lot of standardization, lot of customization, lot of cleaning of the data need to be done, formatting of the data, so that all the data can be uploaded. And remember the normalization that we need to do, so that we have the clean required data into the database. That is the reason why the system development sometimes it takes months or years. It depends on how complex is the system. With all these jobs done, we need to also start thinking about training, where the staff going to be trained, when the staff need to be trained, when the user need to be trained, what kind of training, what levels of training, what are the required skills, and so on. So there will be a lot of questions that we need to plan upfront by the team who are involved in the project, so that all these will be planned accordingly and get executed as per the plan. So with all this, we can expect organizational changes to take place, where tasks have been redesigned, jobs have been redesigned, process designs, output, product, train people, skills, the way we do business, SOP, best practices, reports. We will have new reports online, real time, dashboard, and so on. So it is a complete change to the business. That's the reason why we call it paradigm shift, which we expect more benefits, better output, faster output, and definitely shorter time to market, as business requirement, or the objective that we set during the planning stage. Continue on with the stages that involve in designing and developing the system is the programming. Programming, as I mentioned earlier, it is completely IT job. There will be lesser or no involvement from the users. So it is basically where the development team, the programmers and the developers will take a look at all the system spec from the design stage and translate into program code or into coding onto the identified programming languages and databases. So there will be a lot of IT related work, such as software. What are the software? What are the utility softwares? Operating system need to be purchased or leased or outsourced. All that option need to be looked into, and decision need to be made. And also same goes to the infrastructure, support infrastructure, people, documentation, and all that need to be discussed as well. Upon completion of programming tasks, which might run into months, depends on how big is your team, how good are your team, what kind of skills, whether it is available skill or new skills are required. We will move on into testing to make sure system produces right result, system behave as expected, following the requirement, business requirement. So there are a lot of different types of testing involved here, such as unit testing, but as usual, before we do testing, it has its own plan where need to have what we call test data, test plan, expected output. All these need to be prepared, yeah, as the requirement for the testing to be carried out. So as far as the testing stage is concerned, there will be a different group of people involved in unit testing. Unit testing is the testing that need to be carried out at very module level or program level separately, and then all these units or modules or programs will be integrated, and then we will be doing what we call integration testing. Upon completion of the integration testing by a bigger group of people, then we do system testing, where the system need to be tested for the entire function, compare with the requirements, and where users also will be involved in approving and accepting the system. So we call that acceptance testing. Make sure system is ready to be used in production setting, and then approval and proper documentation, trainings and so on need to be prepared as well in order to make sure testing is completely carried out. An example of test plan is given to you, but it's again like what I said, some of you might have done this earlier, because sometimes we do come out with test plan for other field or other areas as well, but this is just an example for the IT, a very simple one. The actual test plan can be very complicated and it is very long, yeah, and it has more details. So please take a look at this during your open discussion or the second session of the lectures, and if you have any questions, as usual, if you need any assistance, please come back to me. So this is an example of where you need to have a test data, then come out with a test plan or steps that you need to test the data to compare with the expected output. And if it is not as per the expected output, what can be done? What other option we have in order to correct it or to change it so that your new system behave as per the requirement. So upon completion of all these stages, systems analysis, system design, programming, testing, next we move on to conversion or implementation, process of changing from old system into new system. So like I mentioned earlier, there are many strategies or methods of what we call conversion can be carried out. As far as IT are concerned, these are the four main strategies. One is known as a parallel strategy. Parallel means where you run both old system and the new system together for a fixed period of time, and then when you are satisfied with the new system, you do the switch over, stop the old system and continue using the new system. That is parallel strategy. I'm not going to go into the detail, just to help you to understand what are these strategies. Direct cutover is where we are in a situation that we cannot run both systems. Maybe it is too costly or too risky, or options are not available. We stop using the old system and we completely cut over to the new system. Direct cutover. There will be some systems or some cases where we have to do this, we have no choice, yeah, but in most cases we will do parallel strategy, which is safer, less risk. If anything goes wrong with the new system, the old system is still in running mode, we can always switch over to make sure there is a less impact, less business downtime, less risk, yeah. The other method is what we call pilot study. Pilot study is, I'm very sure all of you are aware or have known about this method, where we select a group of people or particularly certain departments, we prioritize them and we introduce the new system only to this group. That's the reason why it is known as a pilot study. So when it works well with this new group of people or with this particular department, slowly we expand it into other areas. Yeah, there are many reasons why we do this. Of course, we want to minimize the risk. If anything goes wrong with the new system, uh, only certain departments are affected, not all the departments. So we can either switch over to old system or back to manual system, and not the entire company will be affected. All right, just to give you some brief ideas what is the pilot system all about. Moving on, we do have what we call phase approach, or we call it stage implementation, where we implement the system stage by stage. Maybe we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Yeah, especially when the project is too large, too complicated, too expensive, investment cost is very high, or sometimes it takes years to complete the entire project. Then the option excuse me then the option we have is to go for phase approach. Example, a railway system, LRT systems, huge airline or airport development systems, roads, for example. So we might go into phase approach rather than we implement the entire system, which is almost impossible. So these are some of the approaches or strategies available within the IT system, within the MIS, to do the conversion from the old system into the new, or completely cut over into the new system. All these strategies requires end user training. Like I mentioned earlier, the training need to be at the right time, at the right people, with the right skill. Yeah, so that we don't have any glitch or delay in making sure the conversion takes place. Finalization of detailed documentation, which are very critical. Like I mentioned earlier, there will be a different group of people continuously work on online documentation. Make sure the detailed workflow is documented. Yeah, either technically from the technical areas, and also from the end user standpoint. Manuals, for example, such as user manual, interface manual, operational manual, system related manual, testing manuals, all kind of manuals, mostly all online manuals will be generated throughout this process to make sure if anything goes wrong, always there is a manual or documentation to refer to. And the final stage, as we have seen, is the production and maintenance stage, where there will be a group of people who will be carrying out what they call system review to make sure everything is in place according to the requirement. Otherwise, if any changes are required or any revisions are needed, then they will be highlighting or coming out with a report what need to be done next, whether it need to be done now or will be done in the next stage or in the future. All that will be included in the report. They may prepare formal post-implementation audit, a document on the next course of action. When it comes to maintenance, maintenance is an ongoing thing, as all of us understood. Changes in hardware, software, documentation, or procedures to the production system, to the live system, to correct any errors, either it is a software error, manual errors, or system errors, or report errors, or input data errors, display errors, any kind of errors. When they are not meeting the requirement, if requires changes, requires improvement, all this will be done under maintenance. Normally there will be agreed time signed up by the vendors or by the IT team, how long the changes can be done, how long they need for the changes to be done. Yeah, so 60% of the maintenance work involve user enhancement, mainly, for example, report interfaces, uh, formatting of some input, output, and so on, and also on documentation improvement work. Some might require recoding system component for greater processing efficiency. Some of the tasks maybe takes too long to get it done. Maybe it is too slow, or the system might have some performance issue. So all this will be highlighted during the review process and will be carried out during the maintenance period. And also we need to understand that once the system goes live, it is very difficult to do changes unless we bring it down or we ask for a windows where we can do the maintenance. So again, it's very much depending on what type of system, nature of business, how long of downtime is approved by the management. So there are a lot of factors need to be considered, because it also involves cost and time, and also involve revenue. Yeah, the revenue would be affected in order to make sure the maintenance can be carried out accordingly. And as far as IT are concerned, the uptime is very critical. We used to have 99.999 percentage of uptime in a year. With that, you may have less than 4 hours in a year for you to bring down the system and to do maintenance, unless it is really critical, or if it runs into unscheduled maintenance, then it is a different story. But for a scheduled maintenance, you need to plan it out, and normally it is very difficult to get it approved unless it is within your window, that 4 hours that I mentioned. Then you can use the 4 hours for the yearly maintenance work. And all of us must understand that when we do maintenance is maybe during the celebration or during the public holidays, where the business are kind of off. And just imagine, during this period the IT team need to work round the clock, the vendors need to work round the clock to make sure all the maintenance work or the bug fixing works are being carried out. That is how the job of the IT or the MIS teams are. Okay, with that, let me see. All right, what we have in the next slide is all the core activities that we have discussed in the couple of slides have been put into one particular slide, where you can see all the stages involved in the system development, against short description of what we do or what are the activities involved in each stage. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of details to each stage, and there is a difference in terms of times and number of peoples involved and number of cost, amount of cost involved in all these stages. All that need to be planned, agreed upon by, there is a strong support from the management team to make sure all this takes place according to the plan.